Hey, how will finance contribute to biodiversity? And really, this is a discussion about investor and all the barriers they face at the moment. Really, the lack of understanding of biodiversity. They have the ESG, they have environment frameworks which I understand better. And this is really about biodiversity, which is very important to me because I'm also invested in conservation, environmental conservation, educational tours, etc. So the biodiversity is a really big deal for me. So there's a couple of points I'd like to touch on today. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm John Harris, and welcome to another episode of Exponential Radio. The first thing is financial risk of biodiversity. And we talk about things, mentioned bees, the problem with the extinction of bees, which will be a really big problem. And services. When you lose biodiversity, a lot of the tourist industry and other services will also have issues and big problems as this continues to happen. So there are really three areas that we can look at, and the one is of these risks is failure of actions. The actions that have been taken that have failed so far, and there's been a lot from United Nations, SDGs, etc., that haven't come to fruition. The Paris Accords, all of these kind of things that really haven't got up to speed. Climate change, which is really affecting biodiversity. To what degree, we don't know. It's a very, very complicated and at the moment somewhat contentious issue. The TNFD is talking about physical, transitional and systemic risks. Under physical, they're talking about obviously ecological damage and the damage to the actual areas and species. Transitional is about legal, tech, and reporting and so forth. And systemic, they're talking about ecosystems and the link to financial markets. So these are some of the things that are problematic. The next thing I'd like to chat about is initiative opportunities, the opportunities that are available. And we've got to try and build a nature-positive economy. So these are some things I agree with, and there are a lot of rabbit holes around here, I understand. But basically, these are good ideas. It's so long as they don't get too politicized. That's a big issue, and too diverted with big corporations, their self-interest. Look, it's a $10 trillion, apparently, dollar opportunity within the biodiversity space for these instruments, these financial instruments to take hold on the markets. Obviously, big one is food and infrastructure, biodiversity, finance, energy, and investable projects is a key thing here. So the people should be coming forward with projects and ideas, and I'm sure AI will start to play a role in this as well. Next point I want to talk about is measurement and reporting, because when you come forward with a project and even any of these instruments, they need to have proper sound financials to make economic sense. So you've got to have measurements and reporting. So you have to have the impact of the investment. What is the outcome? What is the result? What is it going to actually? What is the expected change that it will achieve? Lack of reporting is a big issue because obviously then people won't invest further into those projects. Quantitative value. What is the quality of the whole story and the quantity of it? The ESG and biodiversity opportunity as far as the scorecards are concerned, and natural capital assessments. So those are some of the reporting and the issues that we need to look at and fundamentally get into position in the biodiversity space as well as the environmental space. Financial products and instruments. We've spoken about this is those financial instruments, capital flows, whether it's in the private or public sector. You're going to look at grants, debt instruments, services, and offsets. And they must be able to reward as well for not just for products, but also for processes, procedures, and success stories. As the performance is what I'm trying to get to. So other than just proceeds, you look at performance evaluation. Biodiversity, look, there is an ETF now. There's a biodiversity ETF that people can invest in, and that's for corporations and obviously followed by the metrics, which is going to be very important as to the future going forward, how successful these things are going to be. Markets and intermediaries and regulators. This is another big story because you've got to regulate this whole thing. Once you put these ideas out there, they've got to be regulated, and this is a big issue. And as I mentioned, the other big issues is how much involvement government starts to have over these and how much corporations try to utilize these just for pure profit. So those are big issues. But if we can get the basic frameworks in place, and maybe we can transition through these other things. Stakeholders, conservation is in 195 countries, has pretty good regulation. We've got to build that out. We have to have a framework and policies put in place on a large scale, and responsible investing. So this is where we've had some issues as far as saying, okay, well, the mining sector, for example, or forestry, which are big contributors to the destruction of biodiversity, how much funding will they have access to in the future on the open markets as opposed to other more green projects? So although this has been said, I don't see it in even in the environmental space. I don't see it out there. I still see mining. We got undersea, seabed mining now. We got all sorts of huge, bigger machinery, automated machinery. So I'm not really seeing there where's the pullback on mining. But anyway, the next thing I'd like to chat about is financial risks to biodiversity loss. And here we're talking about the physical risk, risk with regard to governments, corporations, and institutions. Avoiding mining and offsetting, as I've just mentioned some of that, and mining and forestry being some of the big contributors to destruction of habitat. Global corporations, we're talking on a global scale, so we've got to look at how we're going to manage global corporations and what is the focus. Is it just on profit, or is there something more solid behind it? Integrated solutions. We're also looking at investors and collaborations. As I've mentioned, collaboration is one of the big things of getting this done on a large scale, and access to biorisk and asset pricing. So how are these things going to be put out on the markets, and what kind of asset pricing is going with them? So biodiversity, as far as finance is concerned, remember here, I'm not talking about other issues of biodiversity. We're looking at what role can finance have in biodiversity, and obviously, if you follow the money, that is normally where the biggest impact is. Whether it's for the good of everybody or for a few is where we're going to have layers put in of protection to try and get involvement with various sectors of society to try and make sure that it's not just done on a profit-for basis with at the cost of the rest of the people as far as the biodiversity is concerned. So that's a little bit about biodiversity and finance. And as usual, you can go back to johnarthurharris.blogspot.com to get some of my previous episodes. And we will see you in the next episode.